At this point, we've been able to basically protect routes that we require to log in, but we haven't yet implemented our profile page. So we're going to go ahead and try to build that. So the first thing we shall do is to write tests that are going to allow us to implement our profile pages. So we're going to implement the profile page for the current logged in user, so that when they are logged in, they can be able to click on that specific route and then go to their user profile and then display their user information. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we're going to do is to go ahead and write tests that are going to help us to render that specific template, or be able to render that view for our specific user profile. So what I'm going to do is to head over to our code, and within our accounts, I am going to go to our test package right here, and I'll create a new file which I'm going to call test underscore current user. This is going to be current user profile. So in here, we are going to go ahead and try to test the profile for the current user to basically go ahead and implement that user profile. So I'll begin by importing the Django test case class. So I'll say from Django.urls. In this case, we actually from Django.test, we are going to import our test case class. And once I've imported that, then the next thing is going to be for us to create our test class. So I'll call that our test, or shall call this our profile test. And this is going to take in our test case class, so it's going to inherit from our test case class. The first thing we shall do is to define our setup function, which is going to run each time we run our profile test. So I'll do that by defining, so I'll just come and say def, and in this case we shall say set up, and this is going to take in a little bit of variables, but let's first pass it for now. So let's go ahead and define the first test method. So in this case, we're first going to test whether that specific profile page exists. So to do that, we are going to assert for things such as the status code or the templates used and stuff like that. So I'm going to begin by defining that as test underscore and then current user profile exists. So this will take in self, and then right after doing that, then we're going to use our client class, or our client object that's provided to us by our test case class, to make a request to that specific URL. Now I'm going to go ahead and first of all define that URL. So I'll say self.url, and in this case we have to use the reverse function to point to that specific URL of our current logged in user or current logged in user profile. So what I'll do is to go at the top, and then I'll first of all import our reverse function from Django. So I'll say from Django.urls shall import our reverse, such as URLs. I'll import reverse, and once I've imported reverse, I'll just come right here and say reverse, and let's generate a name for our specific URL. So I'll just call this a current user profile, and once I've done that, then also let me provide a template name. So I'll say self.template name is going to be true. So this is going to be in our account. So just come and say accounts in slash current user profile .html. So once we have this, then the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and first of all create our response. So the response is what is going to be the results of us using our client to make a request to that specific URL. So shall do that by saying self.client.get, and in this case we shall pass in the URL, which is going to be our self.url. Now let's first of all assert for some basic things. So the first assertion we're going to do is the one that's going to check for our response status code. So in case we make a request to the page, we are expected to get our response status code, and if it exists, we are going to get a 200 status code. So to do that, I'm first of all going to import our HTTP status class that will give us access to the different kinds of status codes. So in this case, I'll say from HTTP, which is an inbuilt package, we are going to import our HTTP status class. And once I've imported that, then I'll come here and say self.assert. So in this case, we're going to assert equals. So we're going to compare two numbers or two status codes. So in this case, I'll provide the response status code, and then I'll also go ahead and provide our status code that we expect to get from this response. So I'll access our HTTP status class, and then we shall access the property of our status code of OK, which is our 200 status code. And I think we're going to assert for is going to be our template. So in this case, we are going to say self dot. So in this case, we shall say self dot template used, and in this case, we shall pass in first of all our response object, and then we are going to also pass in our template, which is going to be our accounts, and then which actually we define it as our template name, so we don't need to memorize this. So I'll just come and say self, it's going to be our self dot template name. So once we've done that, then let's go ahead and try to run our test. So I'm going to pull up my terminal right here. So the way we're going to run this is by first of all accessing the app name, then we access our test package, and then we access the name of the specific file that we want to test. So I'm going to do that with Python money.py, or you can actually also use coverage run and then money.py test. So just like that, and then you refer to the entire path of the specific test file. So what we're going to do is to run test, and then we shall access test underscore. So this is going to be our current user profile. And once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to run this. So when you run, in this case, we're going to see no module exists. So it seems like we have a mistake in our spelling. It's going to be money.py test. Actually, that's supposed to be within our accounts. So let me try to clear this. So this is going to be within our accounts, and then dot post. Actually, it's going to be within dot test, and then dot test current user profile. So when you run, in this case, we shall see that one test is going to be found, and there is no URL that's going to define this specific URL that we provided as our current user profile. So let's go ahead and basically build this. So what we're going to do is to navigate to our URLs of our accounts app, and the first thing we're going to do is to provide that specific URL. So I'll just come right here and add another path or another URL configuration, and that is going to be for our current user profile. So then in this case, shall have to access a view, but we haven't yet done that. So I'm just going to call this the same name, current user profile, and then for the name shall also give it a value. So I'm just going to come and say that our name is going to be equal to, so let's actually make this also our current user profile. So I'm going to put this in quotes, just like that. So once we've done that, then let's go ahead and implement the specific user profile. So to do that, when you run our test, now in this case, it will tell us that our current user profile page or view does not exist. So then we have to implement that by going to the same view module within our accounts app, and then defining that specific profile view. So I'm going to come here and create a simple function based view. So I'll just say current user profile, and in here it's going to take in our request, and then it's also going to return a specific template. Now in this case, we are going to return, and then we shall render a template. So let's just call this, actually you have to first provide our request object, and then we shall provide our template name, which is going to be the one that we defined within our tests right here. So I'm just going to copy this, and then we are going to go ahead and provide that within our view. So I'll just paste in the name, and now if we run our tests, our test is still going to fail because we haven't yet created this specific template. So to create the template, we are going to go ahead and access the templates folder, and in that template folder we shall begin by creating a new file, and now we're going to call this our account/profile. I said it's going to be our current user profile.html. So I'll remove this account, and now we shall have our page just like you see it here. So I'm going to first of all close that, and once we've closed that, then the next thing is going to be for us to define the HTML for this specific page. So for now, let's first of all provide our block content, and then let's also inherit the layout from our base.html. So I'll say extends and then base.html. So I'm going to go ahead and save. So when I save, the next thing is going to be for us to implement this specific current user page. But before we do that, let's actually first of all be able to provide that specific page. So when you go right in here, so I'm just going to go and then I'm going to first of all go to where we define our layout. That's within our base.html, and then I have to provide the specific link to the profile or the current user profile page. So I'm just going to come here and say URL, and in here shall provide the name of that specific URL. So when you go back to our URLs, we call that our current user profile. I'll copy that and then I'll paste it within our base.html. So I'll go ahead and save. When you go back right here and save and refresh, we can now be able to go to our profile page, which is going to lead us to our current user profile page, which is good. So for now, even when you run our tests are going to pass because we now have the template being rendered. So I also have a snippet I organized for this specific page, and I'm going to put it there right now. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and go within my snippets folder. So in this snippet folder, I have a bunch of HTML that I decided to code so that I save time when coding. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and copy what we have in here. So this is a simple bootstrap snippet. I'm just going to come and copy this entire section, and I'll basically copy it, and then when I copy this, I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. So what I'm going to do is to paste it in here and save. So when you go back to our profile page, we're now going to have this very beautiful page right here. So this is going to have the information about the user, and then we shall also have a link for editing their profile and their information right here with some of the blog posts they have actually been able to write. Now that we've been able to add our user profile page, let's go ahead and put some real profile data right here. We also have some sample blog posts that belong to a certain user. So for us to be able to do that, the first thing we shall do is to first of all be able to access the current user. And now let's first take care of the post object. So to do that, I'm going to go to our views.py, and the way we access our current user is by using our request object, just like that. Through the request object, we can access the current user. So I may say that our user is going to be equal to our request dot, and then in this case we shall access our user object. So now let's go ahead and first of all access the posts that belong to that specific user. So I'm just going to come here and say posts, and this is going to be equal to posts. So there are very many ways to do this. We can actually say posts dot objects. Actually, it's going to be post dot objects. I wonder if we actually imported our post class. So I'm going to go at the top and then first of all import our posts class from posts dot models. So I'll just come and say from posts.models shall import our posts, and then I'll go ahead and try to query for all our posts that belong to the current user. So we can use a filter, and within this filter we can actually say that we want to filter all the posts for which the author is our current user object. So now that we've done that, then let's also create a context. And this context is going to be having our name of our, so in this case we can actually have our user, which is going to be equal to our current user, which we have been able to get from our request. So that's going to actually be our user. And now we are also going to first of all have to access our posts. So now this is going to be from our posts, and this will also be our posts, just like we did in this query. We actually needed to provide an all to, because this is returned as a query set, we need to specify what we actually need from the query set, or if we need a list, or if we need an individual user object, then we shall need to specify an extra method right here. So I'm just going to come and say posts. So then I have to also provide this within the context. And so hoping that our server is still running. Our server is running. So let's go ahead and try to check this out. So when you go back to our template, I'm going to try to refresh this template. And now hoping that everything is working, but let's try to actually access the post that we have. So when you try to go to our template for our current user profile, and that's actually within our accounts, and then current user profile.html, we now just have some dummy data that's being rendered within our template. So what we need to do is to first of all change this so that we can use an actual data that comes from our database. So the first thing we're going to do is to first of all access our blog posts. We actually have our articles for our blog posts. Now, since these are just dummy data, I'll just have to choose one and then use a for loop to include all of them. So just going to come in here, and then I'll first of all get rid of that. Now for the post that we have in our database, I'll just come and say for, and in this case I'll say for post in posts. So in this case, I'll have to provide our article tag. Then inside there, we are going to get access to each post body. So just going to come and say that inside we shall have our post dot title first, and then we shall have the time at which we created this. So we actually created post dot created at. So it's going to be post dot created underscore at. And then here we have the body of the specific post. Now I'm just going to come and remove this, and then I'll have to provide the specific post. So in this case, I'll have to say post dot body, and then I'll use the truncate words filter. So I'll say truncate, it's going to actually be truncate words, and then we shall provide, let's say 30. So we shall also have a link to the detail, but I'm going to include that later. So I'm going to save. So when you go back this side and you try to refresh, we now actually have actual data of the posts that are written by this specific user. But one thing that we haven't yet implemented is the user information or the user profile. So for us to be able to do that, we're going to first of all create our user model. Another thing that we haven't yet actually tested is what will happen if we try to access this page when we are not logged in. So for now, we can access the posts that belong to this user because we are currently logged in. But what we need to do is to access this page only when we are logged in. So I'm going to try to log out. And when you try to access our accounts, so just going to go to our accounts, and then we shall try to access our current user profile. So now we have this error that basically shows us that our anonymous user object doesn't have any posts associated with them. So for us to be able to access it, we shall have to first of all protect this route so that we only access it when we are logged in. So to do that, I'm going to first of all go right in our tests for our current user profile. And the first test I'm going to write is the one for checking if this test will pass when if we actually access the page, what will happen when we are not logged in. So what we need is to redirect to our login page so that we can be able to log in and associate that request with a specific user. I'm just going to come and say def test, and then in this case we shall say current user profile requires login. So this is going to take in self, and once we have that, then we need to just first of all make a request. So I'm going to copy these 2 steps right here. So when you make a GET request to our URL and we are required to redirect to our login page, what we need as our status code is not going to be our OK status code, but it's going to be our found status code, which is the status code for redirection. So it's going to be found. So once we have that, then the next thing is also going to be for us to test if our page is actually going to redirect to the user profile page if we have logged in. So we shall also have to say self.assert, and in this case we shall say assert redirects. So in this case I'll have and say response is going to be our first argument, and then the expected URL that we are required to redirect to. So I'm just going to come and say expected URL is going to be /. So in this case it's going to be our URL for our current user profile. Actually, it's going to be first of all our URL for login. So I'll have to provide it as login. Then after we log in, we shall have a next query parameter, and then here shall provide our URL for our accounts profile. So this actually has to also have a / just like you see here. So to fix this, I'll make it look a little bit more visible. I'm going to place it on a new line so that we have assert redirects and then response and then our expected URL on a new line, just like you see here. So just like we have here, now let's go ahead and try to run this test. Of course, now it's going to fail because we don't have this route protected, but let's try to test it. So I'm going to come right here and run our test. Of course, we expect it to fail because we now have an anonymous user associated with this request. So I'm going to first of all protect our route. So I'll go to views.py and then I'll go at the top of our code. So I'll have to first of all decorate this specific URL with our login required decorator so that we only have a user associated with that specific request. So I'll go at the top here and then say from Django, then we shall access the contrib package, and then within there we shall access auth, and then within the auth we shall access decorators. So the decorator we need is the login required decorator, and then we shall come and decorate our specific view function of our current user profile with the login required decorator. Now that we've done this, let's try to test our create user profile page. So we now see that our status code of 302 is not equal to our status code of 200, and this is occurring because if we are at all to access this page and return an OK status code, we have to then be logged in for us to be able to actually access this page with 200 status code. So let's go ahead and try to do this. So I'm just going to come here and try to first of all create a user object at the start of the running of these tests. So to do that, I'll have to first make our user class by importing our get user model. So I'll say from Django.contrib.auth, I am going to go ahead and import our get user model. Once I've imported this, then our user class will actually be equal to our get user model call. So once we've done that, then let's go ahead and try to create a new user who is going to log in and then make this specific request. So I'm just going to come right here and provide some attributes. So we shall have attributes such as our username for the user we're going to associate with this request. So I'll say that our username is going to be equal to, so shall say test user. Then we shall have an email for that specific user, so shall say self.email. In this case, shall say that is going to be testuser@app.com. Then we shall have our password, so I'll say self.password, and in this case it's going to be our test password. So come and provide that test password right here, and then once we have that, then we're going to create a new user object. So we're going to access our user class, and our user class is going to give us access to the objects manager, and through that we shall have access to our create user method. So this create user method is what will take in our credentials and then create our user object. So just going to come here and say I shall have our username being equal to self dot. So this will be self dot username, and then shall also have our email being equal to self dot email, and then we shall have password being equal to self dot password. So now that we've been able to do this, let's log in and then try to carry out this specific request. So I'm just going to come here and say self dot, actually we shall use our client to log in with self dot client dot login. Actually made a mistake in the spelling. So once we have that, then we shall have our credentials. So we shall provide our username. Let me actually just copy and paste this in here. So I'll just copy our username, and this is going to be what we have here, and also we shall have our password that we shall have it right here. So when I go ahead and save, when you try to run our test, it's now going to pass, because at first we are trying to check whether this page exists. When we are logged in, it's not going to give us any errors, and if we are logged out, we are now going to require a login, which will make sure that we actually redirect to the login page, so that we log in and then we'll be able to access our current user profile. So let's go ahead and try to refresh this page. So when we refresh, in this case we shall be redirected to our accounts login. So when you try to log in, we are now going to go back to our profile. But when you go to our profile, now it's okay, we can actually access our current user page or our current user profile. So now we've been able to basically protect that route, but we haven't yet worked on our user profile. So what we need at first is our profile model or our user profile model. So to do that, we are going to go ahead and try to create our profile model. So I'm just going to go and access our accounts app, and within our accounts app we're going to go within our model. So in our models.py, we're going to begin by creating our profile or our user profile model. So the first thing we're going to do is to first of all import our user class or create our user class from our get user model object. So I'll just come at the top right here and then say from Django. So in this case we shall say from Django dot, in this case we shall access our country package, and then we shall access auth. Then in there we shall import our get user model. So once we've done that, we shall say that our user is going to be, our user model is going to be the call to our get user model function right here. So once we've done that, then let's go ahead and define our profile model. So on our profile model, we're going to have something just like this. We shall have a class, and this will be our profile class. Now this will have specific information for the specific user. So in here we shall have let's say that we shall have here, we can have something like the bio of the user. We can have our profile image. So we can have our profile image, and then we can also have other things such as the address of the user. So once you have this, then you can also have the user as a one-to-one, because then each user is going to have a profile, so there can be a one-to-one relationship between the user and then the profile that's associated with that user. So we're going to now add another field of user. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and try to create this profile model. So I'm just going to come here and say class, and this is going to be our class of profile. So this will inherit from our models dot model. And once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to define our models, our model fields. So our first model field is going to be our bio, and this is going to be a text field. So shall just come and say it's going to be a text field, and in this text field we can provide a verbose name or leave it just like that. Then you can also define our profile image. So shall just come and say profile image, and this profile image is going to be equal to models dot, we shall call this a URL field, because we're going to use an external service to generate random avatars for our users. Now in here, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like this, or we can actually have something like a max length. Let's actually provide a max length to our URL field. So this will be our max length, and our max length for this is going to be, let's say, 500 characters. So once we have that, then let's also generate our address. So our address is going to be equal to models dot, in this case we shall say char field, and our char field will have a max length. So let's just make it a max length of, let's say, 50 characters. Then we're also going to have a user associated to this specific profile. So you can come and say that our user is going to be equal to models. So we shall access the 1-to-1 field. So sorry for that, it's going to be 1-to-1 field. And then the first thing we shall have to specify is going to be the model, to which this is going to be a 1-to-1 field. So this is going to be our user model. And then we shall also define what will happen in case our user account is gone. So shall have to provide on delete, and this is going to be equal to models dot cascade still. So each time a user is deleted, their profile will also be deleted. Now let's also try to return a string representation of this specific profile. So to do that, we're going to come and say def, and in this case shall say str. So what we're going to return here is what we're going to have as our string representation of our profile object. So that will be profile, and then in here actually it's going to be profile for, so here let's say we are going to access self dot user, and then dot, we shall get the username of this user. So let's say dot username. Okay, so once we have this, then the next thing is to run our migration. So to do that, I'm going to come pull up our terminal, and then we first of all create this as a migration with Python money.py, and then make migrations. So this is going to make the migration specific to our profile model, and that will be located within our migrations folder, just like you see here. So just like you see here, our migration has been created. Now the next thing is to apply this migration to our database by running Python money.py migrate. So our profile is now created within our database. So once our profile table has been created in our database, now the next thing we're going to do is to actually register this to our admin. So I'm going to go in our admin.py, and then I'll first of all import our profile model. So I'll say from, and in this case we are going to say from our accounts app.models, we are going to import our profile model. And then using our admin, we are actually going to register our model on our admin side with admin.site.register, and then we shall provide our model, which is going to be our profile model. So once we've done that, hoping that our server is still running, we don't have any errors. So when you go back right here, we shall have to access our admin. So I have our admin page right here, and then I'll go ahead and try to access our home page for our admin. So right here we have our profiles page that has been created, which is good. So I'll go ahead and try to select a profile to change. So I'll add a profile. So in here we have our admin. So this is the admin account that we have right now. So let me just provide that this is the admin, and then that will be our profile bio. So let's also provide the profile image. Now this is going to be a URL field that we're going to generate using a service called Gravatar. Now lucky for us, we have a tool that's called libgravatar, and it helps us to provide an interface through which we can use Gravatar APIs. So what we need to generate a unique avatar for a user is to just have their email address, and when you have our email address, they'll go ahead and hash it using the MD5 hash, return that hash, and then when given the URL, we can be able to generate a unique photo for a specific user given their email address. So let me copy this for now, and then once I copy this, I can go ahead and provide it within our profile image as our image. So I'll also provide our address as, let's say, 123 Code Avenue, whatever that is. Then I'll provide our user as our admin user. So when I go ahead and save, we're now going to have our profile for our admin created. So let's try to retrieve this information on our profile page. So we're going to go back to our code, and within our code, we're going to access the specific post, the specific current user profile template. So to do that, I'm going to go within here. So we are actually going to first of all establish the relationship between our user and our profile by coming to our models, and then in here we have created our user, but we've forgotten one really important thing, and that is to add the reverse relationship from our user to our specific profile. So to do that, I'll just come where we have our one-to-one field, and then I'll provide a comma, and then I'll add one specific related name attribute. So this related name attribute is what will allow us to access our profile from our user. So I'll just come here and say that the related name is going to be user. So once we have a related name such as user, we can now go ahead and call something like user.profile, and this is actually supposed to be our profile, so that we go ahead and call our user object, then the profile. This will return the actual profile that we need. So I'm just going to come here and say shall have our related name as profile. Good. So once we have that, then let's try to go ahead and try to access this. So when you go back to our template, so let's go to our template of our current user profile. In here we have actually add some information about our current user, so let's actually replace it so that we have real user information from our database. So I'm going to go to our views. We had our user being called user. Now in our template, we shall just come and say, so this is going to be our full name for the user. So we actually don't have a full name for the user, but let's just add it. So we shall have our, let's actually just have their username. So in this case, we are going to say user dot, in this case we have our username, and then we are going to have our bio. So just going to come here and provide our bio. So since the bio belongs to the profile of the user and we have our reverse relationship, we can say user dot profile, and then it's actually going to be dot profile, and then we shall call our bio. And now we're also going to have our address right here. So now in here we are going to provide something like user dot, and in this case we are going to provide our, so in this case we're going to provide our profile, or this is actually going to be our address. So we shall access it via user.profile.address. I think that's what we called it. Yes. So when you come here, we shall say address and then save. So when you go back right here on our page and refresh, we're now going to have the specific information for our user. Now let's also go ahead and fill these in. So there are some fields that we don't have here, but we have them. There's some fields that we don't have here. Of course, we're not going to apply them. So I'm just going to come here and provide this field. So we don't have the full name actually what we can provide is our username. So let's go ahead and provide our username, and then within our username we shall provide the user's username. So I'm just going to remove Jonathan Smith, and then I provide this is going to be our user dot username, and then in there we shall also provide our email. So we are going to have our email as user dot email. Now once we've done that, then we shall also go ahead and provide our, so we don't have a phone number as one of the fields, but we can implement this. So I'll go ahead and remove what we have as our phone number field, and I'll also go ahead and remove our mobile. So let me actually undo this so that I remove this and also remove this. So I'll remove that. Now let's also go ahead and provide our address. So since we provided our address on our profile, I'll go ahead and access that with user dot, in this case it's going to be profile, and then we shall access our address. So when I go ahead and save, we are now going to have data specific to the user. Just like you see here, we have our username who is admin, we have our email address, we also have our specific address. So for now our page is looking good. We also have real information from our database, but the problem we have is for each of the users that we shall create in our database, we don't have a way to create for them profiles automatically. So this is where Django signals come in. Django signals allow us to have specific components of our application communicating to each other, so that when something happens, a signal is sent to another component so as it does something. Now let me give you an example. So let's say we had a situation in which the creation of a user account would actually lead to the creation of a user profile. So that's where Django signals come in. So we're going to create a signal that's going to listen for the creation of a user account, and then go ahead to create a profile for the specific user. So I have a snippet of code right here that is going to be able to do that. So I go to our snippet folder, and within here I have this code for save profile. So let me go ahead and first of all explain what this code does. So the signal that we are going to listen to is the post save signal, and what this does is to check whether a model object has been saved. So when we are using signals, we always have a receiver, and the receiver is always the function or the specific function that we need to call. Now in this case, we have our create profile, which is a receiver. We also have our save profile as a receiver. Now the sender of this is going to actually be the user object that has been created, so that when you create a user, we go ahead and create a profile instance, and after creating that profile instance, then we go ahead and save that specific profile instance that is associated to that given user. I hope you've understood me. What happens is we create this specific function which we call the receiver. So this takes in a sender, an instance, and then created. So these are just like conditions. We have a sender, which is the user object, that the one that creates the signal that we've created a user. So go ahead and basically keep this as a signal, send it to the receiver. So once we have been able to create the profile, then you go ahead and save the profile. I know it's complicated to understand, but it's not as hard as it seems. So once we have this code, I'm going to go ahead and basically copy this code within what I'm going to write. So just going to copy this code, and then I'll paste it within our signals. So I'm going to create a new file which I'll call signals.py, and within here I'll have our specific code. So once I have this code, what this is going to do is to actually go ahead and create for us a profile once we've created a user. So there are just two methods or two functions right here, one for creating a profile instance and the other one for saving a profile once a user instance has been created. So now right after creating our signal, our application will need to listen to that specific signal. So for us to be able to do that, we have to go ahead and first of all import our signals in our apps. So I'm just going to come right in here, and all I have to do is to implement a method on our config class for our accounts app, because that's where our signals reside. So I'll just come here and define that specific function or method, and that is our ready method. So once we have our ready method, all we have to do is to go ahead and import our signals. So for our signals to work, we have to import them within our ready method, just like you see here. So I'll have to import that. So I'll just say from dot, we shall import, or from the entire package, which is our account. So I'll just say from accounts, we shall import our signals. So once we've done that, then that is just enough for us to be able to create our user profiles once our user accounts are created. So let's go ahead and try to do this. So when you go ahead and try to, let's say, log out, so I'm going to try to log out here. Now we're going to go to our sign up page, and then on our sign up page we're going to create a user. So let's create another user. So in here we're going to have the user's name called John Doe 123, and then we shall have our email address. So in here we're going to have John Doe, let's say John Doe at app.com. So I'm just going to provide a password here with password, and then I'll confirm the password. So when I go ahead and sign up, our user account has been created. So let me try to basically go ahead and log in with that specific user. So when I log in this case, we're going to have John Doe, and in this case we shall also have a password. Now let me go ahead and provide that password. So when I log in, it seems like I've made a mistake in the password. So this is actually John Doe 123. Our username is what has a mistake. So our user is John Doe 123, and our password is what I'm going to provide here as our password. So when I go ahead and log in, we're now going to have our page being rendered here. So I'm going to go to our profile page, and now we have our profile being created successfully. So now that shows that our user profiles are now created. So this user doesn't currently have posts, but we can be able to handle that. So let's go within our template and maybe show a message in case our posts don't exist. So I'll come within our for loop, and then all I have to do is to write an if statement that checks if our post exists. So I'll say if and else, because I'm using Django, so it will have this specific kind of syntax or template syntax. So I'll say posts, if posts, then we shall have our for loop, else we shall just have an h1 containing this user, or let's say it says you don't have posts yet, so you do not have posts yet, and then this is actually going to be an h1. So let me just create an opening h1 tab right here, then save. Good. So when you go back here, the refresh, we're now going to have you don't have posts yet. Let's also go ahead and try to actually add a link so that they can follow it and go ahead to create a post. So to do that, I'm just going to come right here and add another link, and that's going to have our URL. So if you're wondering how I'm doing this, I'm using the Django VS Code extension. So I'm just going to come and say URL, and then here we shall provide our create create post, and then here I'll say that we shall have our URL. So the link text is actually going to be create post. So when I save and go back to our page, we are now going to go ahead and create our post. So this can be able to redirect us to the page where we go ahead and create our post, which is good. So another thing I forgot to do is to actually associate or be able to provide the URL for the specific user. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go where we have our link. So this is basically from the Bootstrap CDN, or actually from the MDB CDN. So I'm just going to come and remove this, and then we shall provide the image as it comes from the user profile. So I'll say user.profile and then dot. So in this case, we actually got that from our profile URL. So just going to go to our model, and then we have our profile image. So I'll just come and say dot profile underscore image. So let's try to see this. So when you try to refresh, we are now going to have our avatar, but it's not working yet. So in the next video, we're going to be generating random avatars for these users.